Mason's knuckles whitened around the steering wheel as he navigated the rutted fire road. Beside him, Derek stared out the window, his silence as vast as the Montana wilderness surrounding them. 2 years of barely speaking, and now 5 hours in a truck together. Should reach the lodge before nightfall, Mason said, breaking the silence. Derek nodded, still looking away. Unless the road washes out. Storm's coming. The sky above the pines had darkened to the color of a bruise. Weather changed fast in these mountains. Preparation meant survival. Mason's thoughts drifted to Amy, his sister, Derek's wife. The avalanche that took her had been sudden too. One moment skiing, the next, gone. They'd recovered her body 3 days later, frozen in the snow. "We don't have to do this," Derek finally said. "This hunt." "We do," Mason replied, "for Amy." The truck hit a pothole, jolting them both. Mason winced as pain shot through his old shoulder injury, a reminder of the elk hunt gone wrong 10 years back. The same hunt where he'd introduced Derek to Amy. The lodge appeared as the first fat raindrops hit the windshield. A log structure that had weathered 100 Montana winters, it stood defiant against the coming storm. 3 other vehicles in the parking area. Fewer hunters than usual this late in the season. Inside, warmth enveloped them. Old-timers huddled around a stone fireplace, steaming mugs in hand. A massive bear head glared from above the mantel, its glass eyes reflecting firelight. "Frank Tillman," an old man said, extending a calloused hand. "You boys here for deer?" "Black bear," Mason answered, shaking his hand. The room quieted, glances exchanged. "Got a specific one in mind?" Frank asked carefully. "The big one. The one they call the ghost." A laugh erupted from a gray-bearded man in the corner. "You and everyone else for the past decade. That bear's smarter than half the hunters that come through here." "What makes him special?" Derek asked, speaking up for the first time. The men exchanged looks before Frank answered. 400 pounds at least. Completely black except for a white scar across his chest. Been shot at least 7 times that we know of. Never goes down. He killed Tom Burchett 3 seasons back. Another man added. Found Tom's body half a mile from his blind. Rifle unfired. That was never proven, Frank countered. I saw the tracks. That bear hunted Tom. Stalked him like prey. Derek scoffed. Bears don't hunt people. This one does, the man insisted. This one studies you before you even know he's there. And by then, it's too late. Later, in their shared room, Derek unpacked his rifle, methodically cleaning it. You really think this bear exists? Mason checked his own gear, compass, knife, first aid kit. Necessities for wilderness survival. Doesn't matter. We needed a reason to come out here. To what? Bond over Amy? Derek snapped. She's gone, Mason. And we're still here, Mason replied. We owe her this much. To not be strangers. Outside, the storm unleashed its fury. The windows rattled with each thunderclap. Tomorrow we hunt, Mason said, checking the edge of his hunting knife, whether the ghost exists or not. Derek nodded, a fragile truce established as the storm raged beyond their walls. Dawn broke clear and cold, the storm having spent its fury overnight. Mason and Derek set out before sunrise, breath clouding in the 20-degree air. Their packs dug into their shoulders, 60 pounds of gear each, the weight of survival. "Ridgeline's our best bet," Mason said, pointing to the jagged horizon. "Bears will be feeding heavily before hibernation, looking for berries, roots, anything with fat." Derek nodded, adjusting his rifle strap as it chafed against his collarbone. 3 hours in, sweat froze on their backs despite the exertion. The terrain grew steeper, loose shale threatening to send them sliding with each step. "Wait," Mason whispered suddenly, dropping to a crouch. Ahead, the underbrush had been disturbed. Broken branches, overturned rocks. Mason pressed his hand against a patch of disturbed earth, still warm. Something big came through here, recently. Derek's pulse quickened. He scanned the tree line, finger instinctively moving closer to his trigger. They pushed deeper into the wilderness, establishing base camp in a sheltered ravine by mid-afternoon. Mason built a fire while Derek strung their food cache between trees, high enough to deter bears, precarious enough that the wind threatened to dash him against the trunk with each gust. "There's easier ways to do this," Derek grunted, finally securing the rope. "Easier isn't always safer," Mason replied, his mind flashing to Amy. She'd taken the easier slope that day, the one that looked safer. The temperature plummeted with nightfall. Their fire sputtered against the darkness, more psychological comfort than actual warmth. They ate in silence, freeze-dried stew that tasted of salt and nothing else. "You see that?" Derek whispered suddenly. Mason followed his gaze. 2 gleaming points reflected their firelight from the darkness beyond camp. Then they were gone. "Probably just a deer," Mason said, though he didn't believe it. Sleep came fitfully. Mason jolted awake at midnight to the sound of something large moving just beyond their camp perimeter. His hand closed around his knife as he listened, counting the seconds between his heartbeats. Morning revealed massive tracks circling their camp. 5-toed pads, claw marks extending 4 inches beyond. Black bear, bigger than any Mason had tracked before. "He was watching us," Derek said, voice hushed with newfound respect, "all night." The day brought punishing terrain. A steep ravine with loose rock that threatened to break ankles with each step. Mason slipped once, sliding 15 feet before catching himself, palms shredded on sharp stone. "Let me see," Derek said, examining the wounds. "I'm fine," Mason insisted, though the blood dripping between his fingers suggested otherwise. "Amy would kick my ass if I let you get infected out here," Derek muttered, forcibly applying antiseptic that burned like hellfire. They picked up the trail again near a stream. Fresh scat, broken berry bushes, a tree with bark stripped at shoulder height. "We're close," Mason whispered. What he didn't say, the bear was leaving signs too obvious to ignore, almost like it wanted to be followed. From half a mile away, hidden in shadow and stillness, the ghost watched. It observed how the men moved, noted which one favored his right leg, which one kept scanning the wrong direction. It registered their scents: gunpowder, blood, and something else. Something like grief. The ghost settled deeper into its hiding place. Patience was its greatest weapon. and these men had just entered its killing grounds. The ghost moved like shadow through its domain, 400 pounds of muscle and instinct flowing silently between trees. The white scar across its chest, legacy of the first hunter who'd tried and failed to kill it, pulled tight with each stride. It knew these men were different from typical hunters. The older one moved with respect, reading sign, moving carefully. The younger one crashed through brush, impatient, angry, both dangerous in different ways. The bear paused at a stream crossing, massive head lowering to drink. Its reflection rippled in the water, scarred muzzle, intelligent eyes that held more calculation than any bear had right to possess. 7 bullets over the years had taught it lessons few bears survived to learn. It recalled the taste of human flesh. The hunter from 2 seasons past, who had wounded it, tracked it, cornered it. The bear had no concept of revenge, only survival. Yet something in its primitive brain had shifted that day. It had begun to hunt the hunters. The ghost circled downwind of the men's camp, analyzing their patterns. They rose with the sun. The older one checked tracks, while the younger one broke camp. They separated briefly each morning. Vulnerability. The bear's strategy formed not as conscious thought, but as instinctual adaptation. It would lead them deeper into its territory, to the high ravine where rock slides could snap human bones like twigs, where cold sank into flesh and froze the will to survive. Miles away, Mason shivered despite the exertion of hiking. Something felt wrong. 20 years of hunting had honed his instincts, and now they screamed danger. "We're being watched," he said quietly. Derek scanned the ridgeline. Paranoid much? But Mason knew. The signs were too deliberate. The bear wasn't running. It was leading. We should pull back. Approach from a different direction tomorrow. You want to give up? After we found fresh sign? Derek's voice rose with frustration. The echo bounced between mountain walls, announcing their position to anything listening. Not giving up. Being smart. Mason winced as his injured hands gripped his rifle. The cuts had begun to redden. Early signs of infection. He'd need antibiotics soon. Amy always said you were the cautious one, Derek muttered. The mention of her name hung between them like smoke. Mason saw his sister's face the moment they'd found her in the snow. Peaceful, as if just sleeping. Derek saw her last smile as she'd waved from the chairlift. Neither saw the dark shape moving parallel to their path, 50 yards through the trees. The ghost picked its moment carefully. It dislodged a rock with one massive paw, sending it tumbling down the slope toward the men. Not to hit them, to distract them, to make them look uphill while it circled behind. What was that? Derek raised his rifle. Mason grabbed his arm. Don't waste ammunition on shadows. Night fell brutally fast in the mountains. They made camp in a natural stone alcove, backs protected, sight lines clear. Mason's hands throbbed with infection heat as he struggled to start a fire with numb fingers. Derek noticed, "You're getting worse." "I'll manage." The fire finally caught, revealing Derek's face, the first genuine concern he'd shown since they'd arrived. "If you need to head back..." "I don't." Mason's tone ended the discussion. The ghost watched their firelight from half a mile away. It registered their weakness, their division. Tomorrow would bring opportunity. The weather was turning again, clouds building over the western peaks. The bear settled into the hollow of an ancient pine, patient and calculating. In its primitive yet cunning mind, the men were already dead. They just didn't know it yet. Dawn broke with an ominous silence. No birdsong, no rustling underbrush. Just the whisper of snow beginning to fall. Mason flexed his hands, wincing as the infected cut stretched and wept. Fever had claimed him overnight, leaving his thoughts foggy and his movements sluggish. "We need to move fast," Derek said, eyeing the darkening sky. "Storm's coming." They found fresh tracks within an hour, massive paw prints heading toward a narrow ravine. The ghost had passed through recently enough that snow hadn't yet filled the depressions. "This is too easy," Mason muttered, the hairs on his neck standing up despite the cold. Derek forged ahead, rifle ready. Or maybe we're just good trackers. The ravine narrowed as they descended, walls of stone rising 40 feet on either side. Perfect terrain for an ambush. Mason's instincts screamed warning, but fever dulled his usual caution. The tracks led to a stream before suddenly vanishing. Derek cursed, scanning the rocky ground for sign. "It crossed here," Mason said, pointing to wet rocks. "No prints on the other side." Mason frowned, studying the scene. "It's doubled back," using the water to hide its trail. They backtracked, finding where the bear had indeed emerged upstream. But something was wrong. The spacing of the tracks had changed, wider, as if the bear was now running. "It knows we're following," Mason said. The snow intensified, reducing visibility to 50 yards. Temperature dropped with each passing hour. Mason stumbled once, catching himself against a tree as dizziness washed over him. "You're burning up," Derek said, pressing a cold hand to Mason's forehead. "Keep moving," Mason insisted. The tracks split at a rocky outcropping, one set continuing straight, another veering left. Derek pointed left. "That way. The right side tracks are too perfect. Deliberate." Mason nodded, impressed. Perhaps Derek had been paying attention to his tracking lessons after all. They followed the left trail for a mile before it too vanished at the base of a cliff. No way up for a bear, no sign it had turned. "Impossible," Derek growled, frustration mounting. They retraced their steps to the split, now half buried by fresh snow. The right side tracks had also disappeared beneath white powder. "We've lost it," Derek said, defeat in his voice. Mason leaned against a boulder, conserving strength. "We haven't lost it," he said quietly. "It's toying with us." The wind picked up, driving snow horizontally. The temperature plummeted toward zero. Finding shelter became more urgent than tracking. There. Mason pointed to a dark opening in the cliff face. Cave. They approached cautiously, aware that caves meant bear dens. Derek entered first, rifle ready. Clear. The shelter was shallow but dry. Derek gathered wood, while Mason struggled to ignite their emergency stove with trembling hands. The small flame finally caught, casting weak light against stone walls. "Your hands are infected," Derek said, examining the wounds in the light. "We need to get you out tomorrow." Mason didn't argue. Survival had become the priority. Outside, unseen in the swirling snow, the ghosts circled their shelter. It had led them precisely where it wanted them. Isolated, one of them injured, storm closing in. The bear settled into position near the cave entrance, partially sheltered from the blizzard. It would wait through the night. Let the cold weaken them further. Let hunger and fear do its work. In the cave, Mason's fever dreams turned violent. He saw Amy buried in snow, saw the ghost standing over her body, saw himself and Derek too late to save her. Reality and nightmare blurred as the blizzard howled outside and infection raged through his blood. Morning arrived as a slight lessening of darkness. The blizzard had intensified overnight, transforming the world outside their cave into a howling white void. Derek melted snow for water, while Mason swallowed the last of their antibiotics. Too little, too late for his infected hands. "We need to move," Derek insisted. "Get you to a doctor." Mason shook his head. "No navigation in this. We'd die within hours." The fever had given Mason clarity rather than confusion. He understood now what they were facing. It led us here deliberately, away from camp, away from safety. Derek stared at him. "You're saying a bear orchestrated this?" "The ghost isn't just a bear," Mason replied. "It's evolved, adapted. It's learned to eliminate threats before they eliminate it." Outside, the storm began to abate. Visibility improved from 10 feet to 50 feet. A window of opportunity, if they dared take it. "We should..." Derek began, then froze. "Did you hear that?" A low rumble outside, not wind. Something massive shifting position. Derek extinguished their stove. Darkness enveloped them as they strained to listen. Seconds stretched into minutes. Nothing. "I'm going to look," Derek whispered, inching toward the cave entrance. "Wait!" But Derek had already slipped outside, rifle ready. Mason cursed, fumbling for his own weapon with hands that barely functioned. A gunshot cracked outside, then another. Derek's voice. "Mason! It's here!" Mason lunged from the cave into blinding whiteness. Snow disoriented him. Wind stole his breath. 15 feet away, a dark shape moved against the storm. Derek or bear? He couldn't tell. Another shot. A roar that vibrated the air itself. Mason struggled toward the sound, rifle raised despite the agony in his hands. He found Derek backing away from a massive shadow, the ghost 8 feet tall on its hind legs, blood matting the fur on its shoulder, where Derek's bullet had found its mark. "Get back!" Mason shouted, raising his rifle. The bear dropped to all fours and charged. Derek fired again, the shot going wide as he stumbled in deep snow. Mason's first shot hit true. The bear faltered, then kept coming. Time compressed. The ghost was 10 feet away. 5. Mason fired his last round directly into the bear's chest. It staggered, massive head swinging toward him, intelligent eyes locking with his. Instead of falling, it changed direction, lunging sideways toward an outcropping of rock. With one powerful sweep of its paw, it dislodged a massive shelf of snow above the men. Avalanche. "Run!" Mason screamed, shoving Derek toward the cave. The world became chaos, roaring, whiteness, the weight of a mountain bearing down. Mason felt himself lifted, tumbled, buried. Cold pressed in from all sides as snow filled his mouth, his nose. Darkness followed. Consciousness returned in fragments. Pressure, cold, inability to move. Mason's survival training kicked in. He'd created an air pocket with his arm before the snow settled. Now he had minutes before suffocation. Somewhere above, muffled shouting. Derek searching. Mason tried to call out, but couldn't draw breath. His lungs burned. The world started to fade again. Then suddenly, light. Snow pulled away from his face. Derek's frantic digging had reached him. "Breathe! Damn it, breathe!" Mason gasped, air filling his starved lungs. Derek pulled him free, dragging him toward the cave's shelter. Both men collapsed inside, shaken from cold and adrenaline crash. "It triggered the avalanche," Derek whispered, deliberately. Mason nodded weakly. "Told you. It's hunting us." Outside, blood drops in the snow marked the ghost's path as it circled back toward their position. Wounded, but far from defeated. Waiting for darkness to fall again. Darkness fell early, hastened by storm clouds lingering over the mountains. Inside the cave, Mason and Derek took inventory of their diminished resources. 2 protein bars, half a liter of water, 3 shotgun shells between them. Not enough to survive another day, let alone fight off the ghost. "How bad are you hit?" Derek asked, examining Mason's snow-crusted clothing. "Ribs, maybe broken." Each breath sent daggers through Mason's chest. The fever from his infected hands had spread, leaving him shivering despite the emergency blanket wrapped around his shoulders. Derek paced the narrow confines of their shelter. "We could make a run for it. Use darkness as cover." "And go where?" "We're miles from base camp. No GPS. No landmarks visible in the snow." "So we just wait to die?" Derek's voice cracked with barely controlled panic. Mason shook his head. "We change the game." Outside, 15 yards from the cave entrance, the ghost lay partially concealed behind a fallen pine. Blood matted its fur where the bullets had struck. Painful, but not fatal. It had weathered worse. The bear's breath came in steaming clouds as it watched the cave with predatory patience. Inside, Mason struggled to his feet, ignoring the protest from his broken ribs. "It's wounded. That gives us an advantage." "What advantage?" "It still weighs 4 times what we do, and has claws that could disembowel us with one swipe." "It's intelligent," Mason said. "It can calculate risk. Right now, it knows we're trapped, weakened. It can afford to wait. So we show it that waiting means its own death." Understanding dawned on Derek's face. "We bait it." Night deepened. The temperature plummeted to 15 below zero. Inside the cave, Mason's condition deteriorated. Fever dreams twisted his perception. One moment he was talking strategy with Derek. The next he was back on the mountain with Amy, watching helplessly as the snow shifted beneath her. "Stay with me." Derek's voice pulled him back to reality. "Amy would never forgive me if I let you die out here." Mason smiled weakly. "You still talk to her too?" "Every day." A moment of connection. The first real one since the funeral. "I'm sorry," Derek said suddenly, "for blaming you. For pushing you away. None of it was your fault." Mason closed his eyes against sudden tears. She loved these mountains, no matter what happened. I know. Derek squeezed his shoulder. Now let's make sure her brother survives them. They set their trap as darkness reached its peak. Derek positioned himself at the cave entrance, shotgun ready. Mason struggled to a secondary position, using the last of his strength to prop himself against the wall. Now we call it in, he whispered. Derek raised the emergency whistle to his lips and blew. 3 sharp blasts that echoed across the mountainside. The universal distress signal. Also the perfect bear attractant. Silence followed. Then movement outside. The crunch of paws on snow. Closer. Closer. A massive shadow filled the cave entrance. The ghost silhouetted against the night sky. 8 feet of muscle and fury, its breath clouding in the frigid air. Derek raised the shotgun. The bear watched him, intelligent eyes calculating. It took another step forward. Derek's finger tightened on the trigger, then stopped. Something in the bear's gaze held him frozen. Not just intelligence, recognition. It saw them as equals, predators like itself. Mason felt it too. The connection between hunter and hunted. The thin line separating them. Derek, he whispered, lower the gun. Are you insane? Trust me. Slowly, against every survival instinct, Derek lowered the shotgun. The bear remained motionless, watching. Mason spoke, his voice barely audible. We see you. We respect you. This is your territory. Absurd to think the bear understood the words. Yet something passed between them. Predator recognizing predator. For 30 heartbeats, no one moved. Then, with deliberate slowness, the ghost backed away from the entrance, not retreating in fear, but withdrawing with purpose, offering a choice. What just happened? Derek whispered. Mason smiled through his fever. A truce. Dawn broke clear and cold, the storm finally exhausted. Mason's fever had broken during the night, leaving him weak but lucid. Derek helped him to his feet, supporting his weight as they emerged from the cave into blinding whiteness. No sign of it, Derek said, scanning the pristine snow. But Mason knew better. It's watching. They gathered their meager supplies. The shotgun, 1 emergency blanket, a compass with a cracked face. Enough to attempt the journey back, if luck and weather held. There, Mason pointed to a set of massive tracks leading away from the cave. It's showing us the way out. Derek looked skeptical. Or leading us to our deaths. If it wanted us dead, we would be. Mason gestured to the tracks. These weren't made by a retreating animal. They're deliberate. A message. With no better option, they followed. The ghost trail led them down the ravine, away from treacherous slopes where avalanche danger lurked. Every half-mile, they found sign. A freshly broken branch, disturbed snow, evidence that the massive bear was still ahead of them. It's guiding us, Derek whispered, awe replacing fear. By midday, Mason's strength began to fade. His infected hands throbbed with each heartbeat, his broken ribs grinding with each step. He stumbled, falling to one knee in the snow. Leave me, he gasped. Get help. Come back. Not happening, Derek replied, hauling him upright. Amy would kick my ass in the afterlife. They pushed on, the journey becoming a blur of pain and cold. The sun arced across the sky, shadows lengthening as afternoon waned, temperature dropping again as night approached. Then, through the trees ahead, a flash of orange. Their base camp tent, still standing despite the storm. "We made it," Derek breathed, relief cracking his voice. They stumbled the final 100 yards. At the camp perimeter, the bear track stopped abruptly. Mason turned, scanning the tree line. Nothing visible, but he felt the weight of intelligent eyes watching. "Thank you," he whispered to the wilderness. Inside the tent, Derek fired up the emergency stove, while Mason collapsed onto his sleeping bag. Warmth slowly returned to their frozen bodies. Outside, darkness reclaimed the forest. "First light, we head for the lodge," Derek said, examining Mason's hands. "These need real medical attention." Mason nodded, too exhausted to speak. Something had shifted between them during this ordeal. The invisible wall erected after Amy's death had crumbled, replaced by the unspoken bond of survivors. Night deepened. Mason drifted towards sleep, then jerked awake at a sound outside. Heavy movement circling their camp. Derek reached for the shotgun, but Mason stopped him with a weak hand. "Number, it's saying goodbye." They listened as the ghost completed its circuit of their camp. Then silence. The bear had vanished back into the wilderness that was its true domain. "You think it was really hunting us?" Derek asked. "Or testing us?" Mason considered this. Both, and neither. It was doing what we were doing, trying to survive. Protecting its territory. The same thing any of us would do. Morning brought clear skies and the strength to begin the long hike back to civilization. As they packed up camp, Derek paused, looking toward the ridge where they'd first picked up the ghost's trail. "We came for a trophy," he said quietly. "We're leaving with something else." Mason nodded. Amy would have understood. As they started down the trail, a distant shadow moved along the ridgeline. Massive, deliberate, watching. The ghost observing their departure from its territory. Not as conquered prey or failed hunters, but as equals who had earned a predator's respect. And somehow, in the wilderness where they'd come seeking closure for Amy's death, they'd found something unexpected, a way forward for the living.